All right, hello Research Methods students. This is Dr. Camilleri, and what you guys are going to be watching is a little bit of a tutorial on how to use the database and run a couple of analyses. So I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible. We don't have a lot of time because it's a summer course to really jump into the analysis portion, so I'm really going to be walking you guys through this part. So one of the things I'm going to do is make the database available to you guys, and what you're looking at right now is the database, and it looks huge. So don't freak out. I am going to point out which variables you're going to be looking at. There's a whole bunch of stuff we're not going to use, but basically a lot of the columns are all of the questions or all the variables that we had asked, and then all of the rows represents different people. So if we scroll down, we've got about 187 people in our data set. So for hypothesis 1, I've already run that analysis. It's one of the ones that I don't think you learn in the stats class, so we're not going to worry about it. I'm not going to have you run it. I just basically did that one for you. For this one, this is something that you would have learned on SPSS or another program. It's an independent samples t-test, and it's pretty simple and straightforward. I'm going to show you guys how to do this in an online program called Vassarstats. So here's what I did with the database. I'm going to scroll all the way to the right, and all the variables that you're going to need to run for this lab report is going to show up over here. Okay. The first important variable is called type 1 error. If the person's got a 1, that means the person committed a type 1 error. And in our case, what that means is they purchased a textbook that ended up not being used in class. Okay? All the zeros would be people who didn't commit an error. Okay? They did not commit an error. And then if we scroll all the way down, we've got a bunch of negative ones. These are people who committed a type 2 error. So they didn't purchase a textbook. But they ended up needing it in that class, okay? But for our analyses, all we're going to be doing is comparing everybody who has a 1, so all the people who committed a type 1 error, with everyone else, okay? So all the zeros and negative ones. So we don't really care if they committed a type 2 error at this point, okay? So we want to compare these people with these people over here. Now, if you recall, you guys had to come up with a hypothesis about whether some other variable is going to influence making an error. One of the ones that you could have picked was the cost of the textbook. And so this is how much the textbook cost for each of those individuals. Another one that you could have used was the usefulness, their perceived usefulness of the textbook. So maybe if they don't think it's useful, they're probably not going to buy it. Or if they think it's going to be really, really useful, then maybe they're more prone to buying it. And then the last is GPA. So maybe students who are, more dedicated to academics potentially are more prone to making that type 1 error, buying textbooks even though they don't end up using it. Okay, so you're going to be running your analyses on one of these 3 columns. That's based on what you hypothesized about. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run it on a different variable, just so you can see the steps in how to do it. Okay, so the variable I'm going to compare these groups on is the degree to which they find the topic interesting. Okay, that class is interesting. So maybe if they think the course is super interesting, they're more prone to buying the textbook even if they don't end up using it. Okay, and so that could be the moderator. So how do we run it? We're going to jump into a program called Vassarstats. I already have it open here, but the website is vassarstats.net. Okay, and these are the steps to run the analysis. On the left-hand side, you're going to see where it says t-tests and procedures. You're going to click on that. And then you go to 2 sample t-test for independent and correlated samples. Okay, and you're going to get a screen that looks like this. Now the first thing is we're going to have to choose which type of t-test we're going to run. Because it's between subjects, we're comparing one group of people with another group of people. This program calls it independent samples. Okay, Okay, so we're going to click on independent samples. If it was another design, like a within subjects design, we'd click the other one, correlate, but it's not that design. Okay, so for us, we click on independent samples. Now, the way this program works is it's going to ask for your data from sample A and your data from sample B. So in our case, sample A is going to be everybody who committed a type 1 error. So down here, we're going to put their level of interest scores from everyone who committed a type 1 error. So how do we do that? We go back to the database. We take note of all of the ones over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the data next to all of the ones, right? So these are all the people who found, these are all the people who committed a type 1 error, and I'm getting their interest scores. Okay, so there's only about 12 of these people. I'm going to copy it, so you can do Control-C, or if you right-click and copy, that's another way to do it. Go back to Vassarstats, right-click, and paste. Okay, you're going to paste your data here. For sample B, these are everyone who did not commit a type 1 error. So we go back over here, and we're going to, so notice that these are all zeros. Okay, the zeros are the negative ones in this column. These are all the people who didn't commit a type 1 error. So we want to get all of the interest scores from all of the people who did not do that. So I'm going to highlight all of those scores. There's a lot of them, okay? All the way down, okay, to where that last negative 1 is, right next to it. And I'm only highlighting those data, okay? So if I scroll back up, you can see the only things that are highlighted are the scores on the variable next to all the zeros or the negative ones. So now I'm going to right-click, I'm going to copy it, go to Vassarstats, and under sample B, I'm going to paste. Okay, so paste all the data. And then you calculate. Now it runs the analysis for you. Okay, the way to interpret this is from the people who committed a type 1 error, this is sample A, the average level of interest is a 1.5. For people who did not commit a type 1 error, their average, their mean was 1.9. So what the test is evaluating is there a significant difference between those two means, right? And so if you did a bar chart, you know, the bar chart would be including these numbers over here. We're going to look at the results. Here's the result of your t-test, okay, your independent samples t-test. So this is your t-statistic. So we're going to report this and the results, and I'll show you what the results look like, okay? We're going to report the degrees of freedom, and we're going to report the p-value under two-tailed. And notice that this number is not significant. 0.14 is not less than 0.05. Okay, so this is not a significant result. All right, and so that's how you run the analysis. If you look at the unit notes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this output, and I'm going to show you there how to write up that result section. The only other thing you're going to need is the standard deviation for sample A and sample B. Really quickly, you go to miscellanea on the left, you go to basic sample stats, and now you're going to get that same data and paste it there again. So we want the numbers from interest here just next to all the ones. I'm going to paste it and calculate, and here we've got our mean. Where's the mean? Here's the mean right over here, and this is the standard deviation. And when you create a bar chart, this is where you get the standard error from. Okay, and then we're going to do this again for all the people who did not commit a type 1 error. Okay, so all the zeros and down, we're going to highlight their scores. I'm gonna, it should be next to that last negative 1. So let's make sure we do this right. It's all the zeros, and it's got to be to the last person who had a negative 1. I don't know what's going on with those other people there. So I'm going to copy that, paste it, calculate, and then we know the mean over here is 1.9. We're going to report that. We've got our standard deviation. We're going to report that. And then when we create our bar charts to get our standard error, that's the standard error we're going to use for our error bars. Okay, so now you know how to run it. You know how to get this output. Okay, when you run it, you're going to, instead of doing it on this column, you're going to do it either on this one over here, right? If you hypothesized about the cost of the textbook, if you hypothesize about help usefulness, you're going to use this column here. And then if it's GPA, you're going to use this last column over here. All right, that's it for the tutorial. Of course, if you have any questions, just shoot me an email. Nice to talk to you guys. Bye-bye.